Thank you. My name is Dan Friedman. I'm assistant professor of neurology at NYU, and you're going to see me up here for the next couple of hours because I'm chairing the next two sessions, which I'm very excited about. The first session is going to be about diagnostic devices in the early stage, novel concepts, sort of an emerging field in epilepsy devices. And the second part after the break will be about therapeutic devices. So again, the ground rules are the same. Speakers have 10 minutes. Hopefully, they won't use all 10 minutes so we can have some time for a question or two. I'll be keeping time, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Lauren Groven from Cyberonics, Laurie Groven from Cyberonics, who will be talking about the ProGuardian RestTM, which is a novel monitoring system for seizures.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Well, the good news is I'm not going to give you any more instructions about iPad because we'd all be in a lot of trouble. So, well, again, I'm Laurie Groven. I'm a part of the Cyberonics team. I'm the program head of ProGuardian. And for those of you that aren't that familiar with Cyberonics, we are a global leader of a medical device committed to helping people with epilepsy, both the treatment and the management of epilepsy. Over the last 26 years, we've been dedicated to helping those people with our implantable device, VNS therapy, and it leverages cardiac-based seizure detection. With ProGuardian system, we've taken that same cardiac-based seizure detection and modified it so that we could give caregivers a in-home based seizure detection device that is multimodal and we believe will be both CE marked and FDA approved. As all of us recognize in this room, that nocturnal seizures are very worrisome and they're very intrusive, both on the person with epilepsy as well as the caregivers. When we look at different studies, up to 45% of people with epilepsy have seizures that occur either predominantly or even exclusively at night. And as we've done surveys with caregivers, we actually just did surveys for 500 people with the help of the Epilepsy Foundation. And we asked the people how are they managing their loved ones' nocturnal seizures. And actually over 50% of those caregivers said the best way that they've managed them is moving those people, their loved ones, into the room and sleeping with them. And then when we further asked, well, how satisfied are you with your means of managing them, whether it's the sleeping arrangements or using the seizure detection devices that are currently out on the market? And what they said is that they are either dissatisfied or highly dissatisfied. And this is over a period of typically either 1 to 8 years. So this puts Cyberonics really on a mission. And we had an additional data point. Because of all of our work in VNS therapy, we had found that on a weighted average of 48%, that the people with epilepsy have, the people that had generalized seizures, they had a form of ictal tachycardia with their seizures. And so by us incorporating cardiac-based seizure detection as part of our seizure detection device, we felt that we could get to the #1 complaint that we were hearing that people had in the current devices that are out on the market. And that was reliability, accuracy, and a high rate of failure detection. Now, I appreciate that that's 3, and I said 1, but the fact is, if you're getting woken up a lot of times at night, They all basically are the same thing. So let me introduce ProGuardian Rest. It's a device that's still under investigation. We have just submitted CE mark, and we are in the process and are soon to submit for a FDA approval and review. It's a multimodal device, and it's based on changes in heart rate as well as motion detection. Our first generation is going to be just to observe nocturnal seizures. What the caregiver will do when the person is ready to go to sleep is that they will attach a sensor to a very flexible single-use patch, and they will put it on one of 3 locations of the person with epilepsy. As soon as the sensor and the patch is on the person, the sensor will start detecting a heartbeat, and then the sensor will start communicating to the hub, the black device. The distance of communication between the sensor and the hub is 30 feet. If the caregiver wants notification of a further distance, there is a optional application that will send notifications throughout a Wi-Fi enabled home. So at the time of seizure, ProGuardian will identify changes in heart rate as well as movement, and then upon a certain type of combination based on the algorithms, it will send a notification to the caregiver. So it will send notifications both audibly and visually. The caregiver then comes in and confirms that it's a seizure. All confirmed seizures are then electronically noted within the hub, and then the hub generates a report that can be pulled so that the caregiver, the patient, as well as the healthcare provider can now review a more reliable report of all the different seizures in a trending report for a more comprehensive review and discussion about their epilepsy management. But really, with all the devices, as you've reviewed, the ones that are currently on the market, it really has to do with performance. And, you know, there's a lot of ways of talking about performance. I choose to do it in pictures. My chief scientist is over in the room. I think some of you might be able to see him, our chief, Shiv Sabajian. He's over there, my PhD, thank you. He has a scientific poster. We kind of bill ourselves as beauty in the brains. So I do it in pictures. He does it in a lot of formulas. So I would encourage you to go and talk to him during the scientific posters, and then you can determine which kind of version you like and who's the brains, who's the beauty. But we're very confident about ProGuardian by the way we've approached the seizure detection. It's multimodal, as I mentioned before. We've kept the cardiac seizure detection and the movement seizure detection separate, as well as we've moved it from the limb, which a lot of the devices currently are, and we've moved it to the chest sensing so that we could get a higher sensitivity and specificity. But we've also taken the next step, and through all of Shiv's brilliance, we've added a lot of sophistication and introduced and had to account for daily life. So he's looked at positioning, both for, and taking that into consideration for the cardiac as well as the movement. Positioning, a lot of things that are happening in sleep. You know, our large target audience is children. Children are doing a lot of things. You have to rule out daily life activity versus what the subtleties of seizures. We've also added a feature, a sensitivity feature that's specific to both cardiac and movement, and that is so that the parent can dial in what's specific to the seizure as well as the parenting style that will have a direct effect to the level of notifications that they're getting. Lastly, it's about also substantiating. We've done a lot of clinical studies, both on usability and performance. Because of our work in VNS, we had a large database of cardiac seizure detections. And so we fine-tuned our algorithm on the cardiac side using the database that we had and fine-tuned it specific for our ProGuardian device. We have built a similar database on movement, both with people with epilepsy and people without, because you need to understand both regular sleep as well as, or regular movement, as well as movement with, within seizures. As with any emerging device, you always have more that you need to study as it evolves. So we will be going to the EMU to answer more specific questions that our neurologists are interested in. We will be going to the home use situation to answer more specific questions that our parents are going to be interested in. And then we'll also be, and we are starting to gather information and data about the other products out there and be creating and generating consumer type reports to compare, because after all, this is a consumer device and the people purchasing are going to want that comparison. So we're very excited about ProGuardian and the type of benefit and value that it's going to bring the people that are dealing with this type of situation. So thank you for your interest. Any questions?
One question. Anybody? Okay, I think in the interest of time, I think we'll move on. The next speaker is Dr. Jose Cavazos, who's going to be talking about the brain Sentinel, a novel method for detecting seizures.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose Cavazos. I'm a clinical epileptologist and a professor of neurology at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center, the VA. But here I am as the co-founder for this company, which is a EMG-based device that is able to detect, or is aiming to detect, generalized tonic-clonic seizures. The device currently is undergoing phase 3 pivotal regulatory studies that have been already discussed and with the FDA. At the present time, what we have in the current iteration is a device that is worn on the in the arm, in the biceps. It's a device that is it's a little sizable or bulky in the present time. However, we already are working in a model that is able to do to be reduced to about an inch by 2 inches on size. It is a device that is connected via Wi-Fi, so that gives you a range that can be fairly large and sizable throughout the home. It's intended for the home use. It's intended for the use perhaps in monitoring units as well as in long-term facilities. And one of the most remarkable pieces of this device is that it's able to save and store pieces of EMG, as I'm going to show you in a few minutes, that is able to aid the clinician to classify the semiology of the type of seizure that we're talking about, and is able to obtain information from a diagnostic standpoint as to the type of semiology that the patient and seizure type that the patient is having. All of this data is stored in almost real time in a in the cloud. It's able to access and alert caregivers, and is able to give remote phone calls through the phone or alert 911. I'm not going to repeat the needs that we have. The proposition value that we are advancing is again enhancing the quality of life of patients and people with epilepsy, as well as the caregivers of epilepsy. But the other component that is of significant importance is to decrease healthcare outcome utilization in the end by providing better treatments or more fine-tuned treatments by physicians, and perhaps even impact the occurrence of SUDEP. Now, this is a very busy slide that is available in your slide for download, but essentially we have been approaching this through a very multifaceted approach with looking at the market, as well as this is the fourth study that we are doing from a regulatory standpoint, as well as from an intellectual property standpoint. We have 8 filings between patents that have been given to patents throughout the world. We are also working from a reimbursement pricing standpoint, because if this device is going to provide some help to patients, we need to develop some added value to physicians and to patients to be able to understand better the types of seizures that patients are having and having more accurate counts of events. Now, this is an example of the kind of data that we are able to store in the device and actually upload directly into the website within matter of minutes to hours, depending upon what the size of the snippet is done. And that is, what we have here is a recording from the EMG during a generalized tonic-clonic seizure. What we have at the very beginning, besides the noise value, is the beginning of a movement of the patient that had a complex partial seizure. Then subsequently, 8 seconds later, develop a secondary tonic generalization, and it evolved into a clonic phase followed by posictal confusion. At the present time, we have enrolled 100 patients in 11 centers, in 11 NIAC level 4 centers. This is a double-blinded control study in which the investigators are not, or the patients are aware of the alert. The FDA has required us to obtain adjudication of events by a multitude of panels of video electroencephalographers, because we need to determine times. And so, because there's no predicate for this particular type of event, we have been developing a series of procedures. We already have completed the engineering testing. We are also submitting for CE mark, as well as for FDA review. And we are, as I indicated earlier, are in the process of developing a smaller device that is also able to have a cell phone range. And so it allows higher independence for patients. Clearly the market of the number of companies that are pursuing these types of device are several. And certainly our main aim is to improve the quality of life of patients. I'm sure that each of these products will have some benefits for patient care. In particular, as I indicated, one of the things that I, as a clinical epileptologist, have learned out of this study is the incredible diversity of the biology of generalized tonic-clonic seizures. These are things that are not known, or they were not recognized previously as to the complexity, and even just the analysis and our algorithms for seizure detection. I do believe that they do offer some unique needs and meet some of these needs. So with this, I'm happy to take some questions.
We have time for several questions. I'll start with a question.
Sure.
In your discussions with the FDA, did they have any specific guidance for accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity?
Yes, we did. Clearly they are looking at they were using information from the seizure detection algorithms that we have currently in like the Gottman algorithm, et cetera. And so those are numbers that are floating, but again, this is a new predicate, and it's a new set of devices with a new set of data. EMG has not been used for these particular pieces. Please keep in mind that we also are looking at particular frequencies and decomposing the signal of, and that's part of the intellectual property, and using those signals to, so we have a tonic algorithm, we have a generalized tonic-clonic algorithm, we have a clonic algorithm, and so all of these, the different types of events that have motor manifestations, or seizures that have motor manifestations, have different manners of biological expression. And since, as as a neuroscientist myself, we have focused so much in the brain, and we knew that the muscles were moving, but we were not paying as much attention. There's actually a lot to learn in terms of semiology and importantly, better classification, because in the end, what we're looking for is to make an impact in morbidity and mortality of patients. Yes, ma'am.
Any idea whether classifying the semiology of these different GTCs would either inform treatment or predict mortality?
So at the present time, I'm not presenting you the results today because we still need to finish the adjudication and review of the video. It will be presented at the American Epilepsy Society meeting. But the answer is that's what we're hoping. At the present time, we're doing correlations, for example, with post-ictal depression. We're looking also, as you know, from video EEG. So we have the entire video EEG monitoring, and so we're also looking at cardiac changes and predictors for morbidity. Clearly, it's a short-term study, meaning it's a study that takes up to 2 weeks in the epilepsy monitoring unit, followed by the patient taking the device home for 2 weeks if they had a generalized tonic-clonic seizure. So we have actually information on the utilization in the home as well as in the epilepsy monitoring unit. It's short enough, unfortunately, I mean, in the sense not to give us information about the mortality. Obviously, it's just 100 patients, but we are using again the surrogates that have been determined by individuals from who have worked for in SUDEP as the targets that we're looking for correlations. But again, it's correlations. A prospective study to diminish mortality will have to be it's a not only multi-center, it will be more a phase 4 utilization study.
I just want to thank you very much. I think these devices are extremely important for the overall field. I think we underestimate how important the impact is. There's a really important study by Dr. Langan and Nashif out of the UK that showed that if you had a listening device or a person 10 years or older in the room, that you reduce the risk of SUDEP by 80%.
Indeed.
So unlike most treatments which do not improve mortality, some device like this has the potential to improve the life of people with epilepsy and reduce mortality. And I really applaud this effort and the other efforts to try to detect seizures. I think it's a really, really important effort.
So in our device, we do also have an audio component or a microphone component, so we can look for that guttural sound. And actually, that was one of the ideas that we took from Jackie at one point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Mark Lemicule from Epitel, who will be talking about a wireless EEG patch.
Thank you. Today, I'd like to show you our wireless EEG patch, developed in conjunction with the departments of Neurology and Neurosurgery at the University of Utah, and funded through an epilepsy therapy project in association with the Epilepsy Foundation. Where's the little green button thing? There we go. But before we get started, I wanted to clarify an image that Dr. Fisher showed earlier this morning. This is not our EEG patch, but Epitel also provides a number of miniature wireless transmitter systems for preclinical animal models of seizures and epilepsy. And so this image that you see here is actually our EPIC wireless transmitter system for use specifically with rats and mice. And it's designed to mount to the skull of the animal, where it transmits 2 channels of EEG for over 6 months. And so we have users around the world with this. And we even have researchers who are implanting much smaller versions of this device in animal models of seizures as young as postnatal day 2. But a lot of the electronics in this system are used in our EEG patch. No worries. So Epitel is addressing a clear clinical need to improve seizure reporting. And one embodiment of that need is to augment patient self-reporting in seizure diaries with a quantitative electrographic report of when seizures occur and how long those seizures last. And ideally, we'd like to be able to record EEG continuously uninterrupted for many days to get an accurate report of when each seizure occurs. And ideally with this information, an epileptologist may be able to better treat a patient with epilepsy by knowing the time of day that a patient is having a seizure, whether or not those seizures cluster, whether or not the patient even knows that they had a seizure, et cetera, all weighed against anti-seizure medication side effects. And so while traditional wired EEG is designed to determine where seizures are occurring, our EEG patch is designed to determine when seizures occur after a diagnosis of epilepsy. And so our device is in a patch-like form factor that can be placed anywhere on the scalp and is designed to log and transmit EEG for many days. And so, however, for this to be effective, it must be small enough such that someone will want to wear the device out in public, as depicted here in this drawing. And so at the last Pipeline conference, we were able to show our prototype EEG patch, and it's based on flexible circuit boards. And on the back side of the device are 2 gold electrodes that attach to the scalp, and then it has an overmolding of a flexible urethane cover. And this device is designed to log and transmit EEG for over 3 days, and is currently being used in the neurocritical care unit at the University of Utah. More importantly is that we're able to record clean, artifact-free EEG, and this is an example of EEG recorded in the neurocritical care unit in a patient in a drug-induced coma. Our next step is to reduce the physical size of this device and make it more aesthetically pleasing, and to also increase the amount of time that we can record EEG to about 7 days. And as you can see here, the prototype device is still quite large. And again, for this to be effective, we need to make it smaller and make it possibly even fashionable, such as someone will want to wear the device. And so our next iteration of the EEG patch is less than half the size of the original. It's roughly 1 inch by 1 inch by 1/4 inch and looks like a chiclet. And so we propose that the chiclet be also come in a number of different hair colors and skin tones, and even popular children's cartoon characters such as Hello Kitty and Batman. So furthermore, we propose that the device be completely waterproof so that a user can be able to wear the device for 7 days and still shower and bathe. And so for this, we were able to fit all the electronics on one side of a circuit board. On the other side of the EEG patch are 2 gold electrodes, roughly separated by 24 millimeters. The entire device is potted in polyimide, making it completely waterproof. This version will simultaneously log and transmit EEG for 7 days, as inexpensive, disposable, and easy to use. So to activate the device, you simply peel open the packaging, place it on the scalp, and it begins to log and transmit immediately. Probably the most technical challenge that we face is not in actually making the electronics waterproof, but it's in making the device scalp interface watertight for 7 days. And so as you can see on the left is our prototype EEG patch, and it uses standard conductive adhesive gels that you would use in the clinic with wired EEG. And those gels are great for recording for about 3 days, and then after which the gels begin to dry out and the impedance increases to the point where the EEG is uninterpretable. So on the right is our new design, where we're still using those conductive gels over the electrodes, but surrounding the electrodes is a non-standard adhesive. And if we focus in below in the device-patient interface, in blue we have the standard conductives over the electrodes, and in green we have those surrounded by this non-standard adhesive. And so we've identified a couple of adhesives that will bond permanently to the scalp until the skin sloughs or the device is removed with acetone. And that provides this watertight interface that prevents water from getting in and shorting out the electrodes, but also prevents those conductive gels from drying out. Now, a consequence of using such a strong adhesive is skin irritation. And so we've also identified a number of milder adhesives that will still allow us to have that watertight interface, but probably won't be able to record for as many days. And so the next step for us is to take this device out of the hospital and into the patient's home, and in a study where we're going to record at-home seizure monitoring. And so in conclusion, we're developing a small, simple, easy-to-use, patch-like device that's capable of quantitatively reporting when seizures occur in patients with seizure disorders. So, thank you.
We have time for a few questions.
Good work. A question is, how scalable are these patches? So if one wants to put more electrodes, let's say instead of 1 versus 2 or 4, how scalable is it?
It is possible to place multiple patches on, and they won't interfere with each other. Our wireless transmission is very low power and is really designed so that you can bring a handheld device up to one patch or multiple patches and see the EEG in real time. So you could put multiple devices on, yes.
This is a related question. How large of an area does your patch cover?
1 square inch currently. We may be able to make it smaller.
No, I mean of the brain. So if the brain is seizing under your, how far away would it be able to detect the seizure in the underlying brain?
Right. We're still trying to determine that, but ideally we would know where to put the patch based on traditional wired EEG, diagnosing that the seizure is either generalized or there is a focus that's reliable. So, yes.
Are the devices rechargeable, or can you use them beyond the 7 days?
They're designed to be one-time use, and so to try to make them, to keep them inexpensive, we can use multiple devices, and also to keep the size down.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Roz Picard from Empatica, talking about the Embrace autonomic and seizure event detector. And Matteo.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm joined today by Matteo Lai, the CEO of Empatica. Some of you might remember last year I presented in the Shark Tank a concept based on some work we'd done at MIT. And thank you to the wonderful audience who voted us the People's Choice Award last year. Well, I'm pleased to say we've been funded. And thank you. Thank you for your support. And now we've also merged my little MIT spin out with Empatica, and we have 2 things that are really cool we're going to tell you about today. First, just a little background. And this, I'm going to motivate with Bob's not where I just did this. Your comment about the biggest problem is lousy information, because what we're building is both for people getting better diagnostics, better information, and for patients who want better personalized treatment. Show me with your thumb, to wake everybody up after lunch here, everybody thumbs up. What is the quality of information you have today? 10 is the best quality, thumbs up. 0 is I don't really like the quality of the information I have today. Let's get everybody awake here, hands off smartphones. Worst quality, best quality. What is the quality of information you have today about seizures and with your patients or your drug trials? Thumbs. No, sorry. Let me be clear. This is not the quality of information up here today. No, thank you. Thank you for that point of clarity. When you are getting data from your patients, which is what Bob was talking about this morning, do you feel like you're getting really great quality information, 10 thumbs up, or really lousy quality information? I'm just curious. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs down. I don't see any thumbs up. There's one back there. All right, so we are targeting getting great quality stuff, and we're working with people getting the video EEG, gold standard, e-diaries, we're working with those also. But we know that they are limited, right? You can't, it's a wee bit expensive to keep the patient in the EMU for 6 months. So this wristband gives us new information. And the one that's available today, the E3, for you researchers, not patient-facing, gives us the motion convulsion information that other devices give. It gives you temperature, which is new. It gives heart rate, which you're seeing in some others. And the new thing is EDA, electrodermal activity. This is the sympathetic nervous system innervation of the skin, which we showed not for small percents of seizures, but for 100% of generalized tonic-clonic seizures and for 86% of complex partials, had a more than 2 standard deviations above the pre-ictal period significant rise in a study of 90 patients at Boston Children's Hospital. This is published in Epilepsy and in Neurology. In Epilepsy, we show that the addition of the electrodermal activity to motion information gave significant improvement in the accuracy of detection of generalized tonic-clonic seizures. So you see here 3 seizures where the EDA on top plus the motion on the bottom gives you much more clear signature of the seizure than does just the motion information on the bottom. We have a science poster. We'll tell you more about this if you're interested. Also, false alarms. 56 of the children in a group of 73 that was studied here, and these are not people lying in bed. They're up running around, playing games, shaking dice and all. And they are, 56 had 0 false alarms in 3,500 hours of data. The false alarms average rate is sort of skewed by a few people who had a lot of autistic hand flapping and some other things, which, by the way, we have separate algorithms we could put in the device in a personalized way to detect in the future, and that could enable those kinds of false alarms to go away. The other really cool finding that we have gotten that's published in Neurology relates to PGES, post-ictal generalized EEG suppression. This is a phenomenon that was found in 100% of the cases of monitored SUDEP in the Mortimer study published last year. In this phenomenon, after the seizure ends as defined by the EEG here, the EEG generalized waves are going below 10 microvolts for some long period of time. We find that the longer that period of time that the brain waves are suppressed after the seizure, the larger the skin conductance response on the wrist. Kind of bizarre if you think about it. Come by our science poster. We think we now understand, working with a lot of brain experts, why this might be. And it's a fascinating finding that was quite serendipitous. So please come by the science poster and learn more about this. I'm going to hand off now to Matteo Lai, who's going to tell you about the current E3 and the new device.
Thanks, Ross. Hi, everybody. So just a few comments on the device that we sell today. I'd like to point out that this was a device developed for researchers, so it's not as cool as it could be. So we currently sell this today to hospitals, universities, and companies all around the world. And what they do, it's research on human behavior in many different clinical conditions. And it was developed to have all the sensors in a very packaged way, and it's very easy to use. The researchers can also do apps on their smartphones. They can do personalized apps focused on their clinical studies. And what we're doing now, after we partnering with us, we discovered that there's this sensor can be very useful for the epilepsy community. So we're focusing on doing a new version, and this will be the consumer-facing device, and it'll be based on the same technology that we have in our research device today, and it'll be smaller and better looking for sure. And we think that epilepsy patients deserve the same quality of design and products that people that go to the Apple Store do. And in the end, they're like normal people like everybody else. So why should they have worse looking devices? And so our new device will also have, of course, a smartphone app. It's already connected even today for the research version, and so people will be able to see their sleep patterns and stress pattern together with the events that might lead to seizure happening. And at the same time, they'll be able to store the data on the cloud, of course, and they'll be able to see with their physician and clinician how the their signals are going, and they also be able to alert their caregivers. And if you want to know more, if you're interested about better information, as you said at the beginning, please come to us or write us an email. Thanks.
Thank you. We have time for a few questions. Anybody?
Okay.
Must be some.
You're shy.
There's one.
I just want to say the same comments I made before apply to you guys too.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Your support means a lot.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next up, we'll have Anu Nathan from Smart Monitor talking about automated seizure tracking and recording.
Good afternoon. I'm Anu Nathan from Smart Monitor. It's just wonderful to see the plethora of devices that are aiming to detect seizures. And it's very heartening because this is such a big need. Today I'm here to talk about our product, which we have successfully commercialized with the help of some grants from the Epilepsy Therapy Project and the Epilepsy Foundation after very good clinical validations at leading medical institutions. Our product is based on an accelerometer. This is science and technology that is very mature and has been around for several years. So I'm not going to be talking so much about the science as about the product itself, what it does, the features it supports. And we are already out in the market, and we've evolved the product based on feedback from our users. We learn from the market very well. At the centerpiece of our solution is a smartwatch. It is an ordinary wristwatch, and it tells time and the date in addition to a whole bunch of other things. It is completely non-invasive, it's passive, and it continuously monitors movement. When it detects patterns of repetitive shaking movement that are very similar to those caused by the grand mal or the generalized tonic-clonic seizures, it issues alerts very quickly to caregivers and designated alert recipients in the form of text messages and phone calls. We also send out GPS locations along with these alerts so the care providers know where the seizing person is. We've also engineered the product to have a whole bunch of other utility besides alerting upon the onset of these repetitive movements. We have a panic button that users can push upon any kind of emergency. A lot of our users push the button when they have auras just prior to the seizures. We send out medication reminders to the device, to the watch itself. The name of the medication is displayed on the watch, and this we hear has helped increase adherence and compliance with medication. The watch also triggers the recording of audio, the vocalizations that happen upon the onset of these seizures. We found from the clinician community that that has been extremely well received when patients take this data and share that with the clinicians. Here's a quick graphic on how it works. The patient prone to seizures wears the smartwatch. It works in conjunction with the companion smartphone. We have algorithms running on the device itself that look for patterns of repetitive shaking that are very, very indicative of the grand mal seizures. Upon making this determination that it's an alertable event, the text messages and the phone calls go out within seconds to care providers so they can intervene in a very timely manner and provide the necessary assistance. In a very frictionless manner, we also collect data on back-end cloud servers that can be used for later reporting, tracking, and sharing with the physicians. So the data, the value of the data that's being collected, or the importance of data in optimizing therapeutic regimens, has been touched upon many times today. And I like to divide the data into a couple of different buckets. We collect a lot of the episodic data, the duration, how long do these shaking episodes occur, what is the severity, how severe is the shaking and the convulsions, and how often are these episodes occurring, time of day patterns, and we also have, as I mentioned, audio recording that clinicians find extremely useful. And in the future, we'll be incorporating video as well. We don't automatically detect the non-generalized tonic-clonic seizures, but we provide a push button that users can use to self-report for tracking purposes the occurrence of a partial onset seizure. We also track sleep quality. We are completely movement-based today, so we track sleep quality, the length of the sleep and wake cycles, and clearly everyone in this room is aware of the research that correlates sleep deprivation with the increased onset of these GTC episodes. And then we already talked about the fact that we send out medication reminders, which is, and we also know if the device is being used or if it's just sitting on the shelf. So we have the ability to determine that as well. A quick slide on the validation. This was completed a couple of years ago. We validated it across both the adult populations and the pediatric population. In Stanford, we had the adult study, very high sensitivity. The specificity was not as high as we would have liked it to be in the Stanford study. The paper has been published after the study. And since then, the Stanford study concluded in June of 2010. That's pretty close to about 4 years now. And since then, we have done a lot of work in improving the algorithms. We had a UCSF study with pediatric patients, and sensitivity was very, very high. We did not miss a single seizure. Specificity, we had 1 false positive in all the children, all the hours of testing at UCSF. And we did our own in-home patient tests, and then we brought the product to market right after that. So what is very heartening for us is that we continue to see validation from the clinician community that speaks to the value of the data that we are collecting. We have several pilots and field studies coming up this year. The study with the pediatric patients at Le Bonheur is already underway with Dr. Wallace as the PI. We have Stanford study integrating it with the electronic seizure diary, the My Epilepsy diary, the University of Virginia study with adolescents. Both of these are ready to go, and they are starting next week. And we have a upcoming study with Boston Children's and NYU as well. Boston Children's will be an inpatient one, and NYU is going to be an outpatient study. We are looking at getting the IRBs approved for these studies as well. So just a lot of information, because we are able to collect data in a very frictionless manner that was not possible in an outpatient setting before. So that's the crux of all of these studies, taking in all of those data, all of that data, and drawing some very, very useful conclusions and inferences from that. So here is a sample of the dashboard that we have today that a lot of our customers are taking and sharing with their neurologists. This is a mock-up, it's not real data. This is just for the presentation here. And we have several different versions of this dashboard, different types of dashboards. And we will allow physicians to log in and look at the data pertaining to their patients, and just rich information that was not possible before. I'd like to conclude with a quick summary. We are a completely non-invasive product for both indoor and outdoor monitoring, nighttime, daytime use as well. And we are very, very socially acceptable. That's what our customers tell us. We don't broadcast a medical condition, so it's very ubiquitous devices. And today we are marketing this and selling this not just in the US, but we also have international customers. We have distribution partnerships in Australia, the UK, the rest of the European Union. We've already talked about our tests and the field tests and the upcoming studies, and as we speak, we are preparing submissions for an FDA 510(k) clearance for our product. Today, we are making a big difference in the lives of the customers who are using us. We have over 90% utilization on a daily basis of our device from the customers that we have. And we are truly gratified to see what a game changer the product is in the lives of so many people, the peace of mind that it brings, and the enhancement in the quality of life. Let me pause with that and open it up for questions.
I guess I'll ask a question. Now that you've been on the market for some time, do you have any sense of who your consumers are? Are they mostly adults, mostly children?
Definitely. I think we have a good sense of the demographic. Today, we have 60% of our users under the age of 21, and 40% are adults, which surprised us. Honestly, we thought we would have an overwhelming number of children who are the prospective users, but we find that 40% of them are adults.
Are you seeing continued growth? People, interest is growing in this? People are starting to discuss this? Are you excited about it?
Yes, absolutely. We are definitely seeing that as well. When we first brought the product to market, we had a couple of reasons. We had a one-time pricing option. It was about $800 to $1,000, and it was a little expensive. But since then, we have moved on and successfully implemented a monthly subscription-based pricing model, which is very, very consumer-friendly price points. So that is one aspect of it. And then initially, when we first launched the product, we were seeing a lot of adoption for the peace of mind factor that it brings to the families, and that's unquestionably the case. As we move forward, we are finding a lot of pull coming in from the clinicians. We have people reaching out to us saying, my doctor recommended this product to me. They want me to take the data and share it with them during the next visit. So that is really gratifying to us. We are seeing a lot of that, especially the last few months. We are seeing a lot of that. Since the last AES show, we are seeing a lot of people asking for that.
I think one thing is to get the nurses really excited about that, and also kids in developmental centers where they're not getting good supervision sometimes. Very important, because I have so many people that have died in those situations from SUDA. Get the nurses involved too. I think they'll do a lot of pull in that area.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. We'd love to do that as well.
I may have missed this, but the detection depends on a certain kind of movement and repetitive motion. And so I'm wondering how many seizures you miss that don't have that repetitive motion.
So when we market this product, we are very, very clear that we can only detect events that have a significant motor component and that has these types of repetitive shaking motion. We are very open with that. And in fact, when people call us and ask us, my head twitches when I have seizures, will you be able to detect that? The answer is no. So we are very, very clear about the message, about the types of events that we are able to detect. And that we've had pretty good luck with that, in the sense that the messaging seems to be clear, so our customers who buy know exactly what they are getting and what we can and cannot do.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
And the last speaker for this panel, for this session, is Kristen Gilchrist from RTI, talking about ESAP.
All right, I am pleased to talk to you today about RTI's Seizure Alert platform, which we are calling ESAP. Since I don't think everybody knows what RTI is, just a quick introduction. We are an independent nonprofit research institute. We do work for both commercial and government clients, and it's truly a multidisciplinary place, from international development to life sciences, drug discovery, to the group that I'm in, which focuses on engineering and advanced technology. So ESAP is RTI's Seizure Alert platform, which was inspired by my colleague, Barbara Kroner, who has a daughter, Ellie, with frequent seizures. And she began discussions with people across RTI if there was a way for us to make a better monitor so that her child wouldn't have to be by herself if she had a seizure, particularly at night. And so this started some internally funded work to develop a seizure detection system based on elevated autonomic nervous system activity, like some of the other previous speakers have talked about. So we're working toward a device to remotely alert caregivers, high accuracy, few false alarms, and comfortable enough to wear daily. We completed in 2012 a first clinical study at Children's National Medical Center just to validate our detection approach. And this involved data from 28 children. And we were just storing the data and post-analyzing, but we demonstrated that the approach could achieve high accuracy. And then to the left there are just some of the earlier statistics, showing very high success rates for the most severe seizures, and even close to 50% on the partials. Then late last year, we got an R01 grant from the NIH to turn this into a prototype and finalize the algorithm and perform additional clinical trials. So we have started those trials now, again at Children's National, and we have mixed up the hardware a little bit to make it a little less burdensome. We've eliminated some of the sensors, and we're now converting our algorithm to be something that works in real time. So as I mentioned, the algorithm is based on elevated autonomic nervous system activity, which often precedes seizure-related motion. We are primarily focused on how this manifests itself in the heart. And we are using a multi-parametric approach because we want to try to detect more seizures and minimize false positives. So I'm just showing an example here of 3 different parameters that we pull out of an ECG stream. And it looks like my shading didn't really turn out, but in this example, the top parameter has a clear response during a seizure, but for many patients, this parameter doesn't do anything during a seizure, so it alone is not enough. So you add in other parameters, and these are just a few, and through signal processing, you figure out ways to weight different parameters to try to catch more seizures. So we're also developing a physical prototype, and to do this, we are using currently the Zephyr BioPatch as our sensor, and we're developing our own custom board to run the algorithm. Now, ultimately, in a product, those first 2 blocks could be combined, and the sensor could include the algorithm. We're trying to remain kind of agnostic to the devices on either side of the slide, and just get something where we can use a commercial off-the-shelf device to run our algorithm and get clinical data. The wearable sensor market is exploding, and I think there's going to be tons of options there, so it's a good time to be doing this. The technology to alert smartphones is well established, so it's really about the signal processing, and to make the best monitor, you need the best algorithm to include the most people. So the BioPatch has both temperature, motion, and ECG streaming. So I think the key development challenge is making a monitor that works for everybody. So if I was making a custom monitor for one person and could see what their seizures look like and what their baseline data looks like, it would be much less daunting. But we deal with the fact that every subject has very different seizure profiles and different baseline profiles, and what parameters work best for one child are different for somebody else. So this is a very extreme example on the right, but you can see in one child, their seizure is marked by a substantial heart rate increase, which is sustained over many minutes. And the other child, B at the bottom in red, their less severe seizures are marked by a very quick heart rate decrease. So this kind of shows you the span that we're dealing with. And so I think because it's not practical to design everybody a custom algorithm, that the device needs to learn. So it needs to learn from its successes and its mistakes and adapt so that it can be the best detector for that patient that is wearing it. And the technology exists for things to be able to do that now, and so that's the direction we're headed. I just want to close by reiterating that we are a nonprofit research institute, so we're not looking to commercialize this ourselves. We're looking for partners. We will not do the marketing or the manufacturing ourselves, and we're happy to talk to anyone about this to move forward. Thanks.
We have time for a few questions. I just want to remind everybody that if they could go to the microphone to ask questions, that's the only way the internet can hear us.
In one of the slides in the middle of your presentation, you make the statement that the signal from the autonomic nervous system precedes the occurrence of the seizure. Did I understand that correctly?
It can precede the seizure-related motion.
And if so, what's the latency between the detection of the autonomic nervous system signal and that second event?
We're typically pretty close to the onset as measured by EEG, the electrographic onset, like I would say within a few seconds. So the clinical onset, which is usually later, we can proceed. It really depends on the difference in the patient between the EEG onset time and the clinical onset. So if it's in a patient where those are 20 seconds apart, then we might beat it by 20 seconds. But if it's in a patient where those are 2 seconds apart, so I feel like it can be a little bit misleading if you just take an average time because it's really just dependent on that difference in the patient.
Any other questions? Thank you. All right. Next up is we're going to have about a 15-20 minute panel discussion, and I'd like to bring up to the podium the panelists, Michelle Wellborn, who is from the Intractable Childhood Epilepsy Foundation and a parent of a child with epilepsy. Catherine Jacobson, who is a postdoctoral fellow at UCSF and also a parent of a child with epilepsy. And Tom Stanton, who's the executive director of the Danny Did Foundation, an advocacy group for people with epilepsy with a lot of experience counseling people on devices. And let me give you a name tags. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this. Let me just, I guess I'll moderate from here and get my questions up for the panel. So I guess the question that I want to start with for all the panelists is, you know, for you as advocates and for you as parents of children with epilepsy, where do you see these devices, the kind of device that we've been talking about for the past 45 minutes fit into the care of your child? So maybe start with you, Kathy.
Oh, sure. So we have kind of an unusual case in that my child has the type of seizures that are not really convulsive. And my main concern, they're all nocturnal, they're very severe, 15 minutes long, he stops breathing. And so, of course, I'm really concerned with SUDEP every single night. And so the way I see these alerting devices fitting into our life is providing me with some peace of mind so that we can sleep and know that we will be alerted to a seizure when they happen. So a low false negative rate and hopefully a low false positive rate, although I would always err on the side of a low false negative. I would rather be alerted more often than not. And get that peace of mind. And we're in a difficult category because we can't rely on motion to detect a seizure. So for me, the autonomic nervous system piece, the heart rate increase detector, some multi-parametric device would be very important.
I agree with Catherine. My daughter has Dravet syndrome and has most of her seizures when she sleeps. Ideally, in a situation with a catastrophic epilepsy syndrome in which a lot of or most of the seizures are prolonged, actually having a device that can preempt a seizure, tell you before the seizure starts, would be the most effective. Because then you could go ahead and pre-treat and maybe prevent hospitalization, ER visit, and even death in the situation of these events of status epilepticus. Also, having a device that can detect more than a generalized tonic-clonic seizure, such as a simple partial seizure, and ideally non-convulsive seizures, which happen frequently in children who have different catastrophic syndromes. And I'm not sure we're there yet for these devices at this point.
So the Danny Did Foundation got started after my nephew Danny passed away from SUDEP in 2009. And one thing that his parents asked, one question they asked after he passed away was, how can there not be something out there that could have alerted us to his nocturnal seizures? So he only had 4 seizures in his life that his parents knew of, and the 5th one took his life. So he didn't have a high volume of seizures. But we started looking around after that happened, and got really into the, came to the conclusion that, devices that can monitor seizure activity are underrepresented to parents. There's not a lot of awareness out there of the options available. So we view these as something that can complement medicine, that can complement surgery if that's a route you go, that could complement diet if that's a route a family wants to go, but that they should know their options as to what's out there. And I agree with Michelle, some type of preventative device is the optimal solution, but in the interim, for now, something that can monitor and enable early intervention to make sure you can check on the safety of your loved one is a huge advantage.
Tom, you counsel a lot of patients and families about devices, and what sort of things are people using now in the, to monitor their children or their family members?
Oftentimes it's something as simple as a baby monitor. I mean, that's something that we hear all the time. I think the most extreme scenario that I've heard from a family is a wife that ties bells to her ankles to connect with her husband so that when she seizes, he's notified that way. There's, baby monitors is the one that we hear most commonly. Families want really any opportunity to be notified, to get into the room is their goal. So that's usually the typical one that we hear before a family wants to investigate something else that they've heard about.
What kind of questions do they ask you about devices? What do they want to know?
They want to know, which device should we use is a common question that we get, and that depends on their scenario. If they're looking for daytime versus nighttime monitoring or both, they want to know what the device can measure. What kind of movement, heart rate, respiration. They want to know what kind of data can it capture. The duration of the seizure, different variable measures that they can present to their doctor is a question that they have for us often. And the thing that probably the second most common question we get besides which device should we use is how much does it cost?
Mm-hmm. So maybe you guys could speak to a little about that. Is what is a reasonable price to pay? Should these devices be covered by insurance and those sorts of things?
Well, ideally, it would be nice if they were covered by insurance. And I don't really know. It's priceless to be able to prevent a seizure and to prevent your child from potentially dying of SUDEP. I'm going to interject one thing that maybe you guys are faced with as clinicians and you deal with, or maybe you don't, or you don't think about resources that the parents may have. But often children who have catastrophic epilepsy syndromes are able to get private duty nursing services, particularly if they're at a high risk of SUDEP. So I would encourage you to think about that as you evaluate your patient and what their mortality risk is. I have a 9.5-year-old with Dravet syndrome who has had private duty nursing services all of her life. And so I actually have a nurse with her at night that watches her sleep. And so I think the resources are out there, and I think insurance companies, the more that we make people aware of this, and I think that you're likely to get coverage if you try to pursue it.
I would say also that obviously it's priceless. I would never be able to put a price on how much I'm willing to pay in order to get this to potentially save my son's life. But I think we're talking here about two different things, and one is the seizure alerting devices that can save his life, and then the other device is the data collection piece, and the piece that would help us get better care, or collect data in order to inform his treatment. And I'm a big believer in collecting data, but I'm not sure that the same device can do both things very well. So I think it's important to think about whether the device will just, alert you to a seizure so that you can do what you need to do to give him oxygen, give him rescue medication, and be there to intervene, and then a data collection device that would, over the long term, benefit us by improving his care and being able to share accurate information with his doctor. I mean, to be honest, I don't even know how many seizures my son has at night. Sometimes we stay up and watch him all night, and that's the only way I would ever know how many seizures he's having at night right now. So that's really important to know.
What do you guys think about the different form factors that were presented? Wristwatch versus patches versus, what are your thoughts about what is best for a patient with epilepsy?
Well, I'm one of those parents that uses a baby monitor, and I understand the value of the other forms, but I would really always like to see visually what's happening at night. So a wristwatch, I think, would be useful, and during waking hours would be fine. But at night, I think you really need to have that visual to know what's actually happening and what the seizure looks like. And there's nothing like the computing power of a brain to try to understand what that motion is. So I think a video component, at least for nighttime, would be very important.
I think all of the devices make sense. I think that the way that they are being developed makes sense for the applications that they're being used right now. One of the companies did mention the fact that some of the kids might be hypersensitive and the skin might be sensitive to different tapes and things like that. That certainly is a big deal for us. But I think that if we could, most of the time, you're going to need to wear two devices unless you have generalized tonic-clonic seizures. And so that still goes back to kind of the root of the problem that I explained to start with.
So, Tom, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's really important that families have a range of options. So, what works for one might not work for another. We talk with families that use multiple devices just because they're looking to do different things. So I think that's the big value and importance of a conference like this, is to try to encourage that competition, that spirit of getting the best product to the market is really important to the end users. It makes a huge difference in their lives, and I think there is a market for many different devices, and I hope a lot of these that we've heard about get to the finish line.